Bacterial diseases in humans. Devastating pathogen-borne diseases and plagues, both viral and bacterial in nature, have affected and continue to affect humans. It is worth noting that all pathogenic prokaryotes are bacteria. There are no known pathogenic archaea in humans or any other organism. Pathogenic organisms evolved alongside humans. In the past, the true cause of these diseases was not understood, and some cultures thought that diseases were a spiritual punishment or were mistaken about material causes. Over time, people came to realize that staying apart from afflicted persons, improving sanitation, and properly disposing of the corpses and personal belongings of victims of illness reduced their own chances of getting sick.
Welcome back to Concepts of Biology. We'll continue to read Chapter
13, Section 13.1, Historical Perspective. There are records of infectious diseases as far back as 3000 BC. A number of significant pandemics caused by bacteria have been documented over several hundred years. Some of the largest pandemics led to the decline of cities and cultures. Many were zoonoses that appeared with the domestication of animals, as in the case of tuberculosis. A zoonosis is a disease that infects animals but can be transmitted from animals to humans. Infectious diseases remain among the leading causes of death worldwide. Their impact is less significant in many developed countries, but they are important determiners of mortality in developing countries. The development of antibiotics did much to lessen the mortality rates from bacterial infections, but access to antibiotics is not universal, and the overuse of antibiotics has led to the development of resistant strains of bacteria. Public sanitation efforts that dispose of sewage and provide clean drinking water have done as much or more than medical advances to prevent deaths caused by bacterial infections. In 430 BC, the plague of Athens killed 1/4 of the Athenian troops that were fighting in the Great Peloponnesian War. The disease killed 1/4 of the population of Athens in over 4 years and weakened Athens' dominance and power. The source of the plague may have been identified recently when researchers from the University of Athens were able to analyze DNA from teeth recovered from a mass grave. The scientists identified nucleotide sequences from a pathogenic bacterium that causes typhoid fever. From 541 to 750 AD, an outbreak called the Plague of Justinian, likely a bubonic plague, eliminated by some estimates 1/4 to 1/2 of the human population. The population in Europe declined by 50% during this outbreak. Bubonic plague would decimate Europe more than once. One of the most devastating pandemics was the Black Death between 1346 to 1361, which is believed to have been another outbreak of bubonic plague caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. This bacterium is carried by fleas living on black rats. The Black Death reduced the world's population from an estimated 450 million to about 350 to 375 million. Bubonic plague struck London hard again in the mid-1600s. There are still approximately 1,000 to 3,000 cases of plague globally each year. Although contracting bubonic plague before antibiotics meant almost certain death, the bacterium responds to several types of modern antibiotics, and mortality rates from plague are now very low. Over the centuries, Europeans developed resistance to many infectious diseases. However, European conquerors brought disease-causing bacteria and viruses with them when they reached the Western Hemisphere, triggering epidemics that completely devastated populations of Native Americans who had no natural resistance to many European diseases. The Antibiotic Crisis. The word antibiotic comes from the Greek anti, meaning against, and bios, meaning life. An antibiotic is an organism-produced chemical that is hostile to the growth of other organisms. Today's news and media often address concerns about an antibiotic crisis. Are antibiotics that were used to treat bacterial infections easily treatable in the past becoming obsolete? Are there new superbugs, bacteria that have evolved to become more resistant to our arsenal of antibiotics? Is this the beginning of the end of antibiotics? All of these questions challenge the healthcare community. One of the main reasons for resistant bacteria is the overuse and incorrect use of antibiotics, such as not completing a full course of prescribed antibiotics. The incorrect use of an antibiotic results in the natural selection of resistant forms of bacteria. The antibiotic kills most of the infecting bacteria, and therefore only the resistant forms remain. These resistant forms reproduce, resulting in an increase in the proportion of resistant forms over non-resistant ones. Another problem is the excessive use of antibiotics in livestock. The routine use of antibiotics in animal feed promotes bacterial resistance as well. In the United States, 70% of the antibiotics produced are fed to animals. The antibiotics are not used to prevent disease, but to enhance production to their products. Staphylococcus aureus, often called staph, is a common bacterium that can live in and on the human body, which usually is easily treatable with antibiotics. A very dangerous strain, however, has made the news over the past few years. This strain, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or MRSA, is resistant to many commonly used antibiotics, including methicillin, amoxicillin, penicillin, and oxacillin. While MRSA infections have been common among people in healthcare facilities, it is appearing more commonly in healthy people who live or work in dense groups like military personnel and prisoners. The Journal of the American Medical Association reported that among MRSA-afflicted persons in healthcare facilities, the average age is 68 years, while people with community-associated MRSA, or CAMRSA, have an average age of 23 years. Figure 13.7. This scanning electron micrograph shows methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus bacteria, commonly known as MRSA. In summary, society is facing an antibiotic crisis. Some scientists believe that after years of being protected from bacterial infections by antibiotics, we may be returning to a time in which a simple bacterial infection could again devastate the human population. Researchers are working on developing new antibiotics, but few are in the drug development pipeline, and it takes many years to generate an effective and approved drug. Hi, if you found this video informative, share the link. We want these free textbook resources to be available to other students. All right, let's get back to reading. Now on to food-borne diseases.